Hi everybody, my name's Sam Johnston. I'm a landscape architect. I work for a company called Gustafson Porter in London. We're an international design firm, and we do projects mostly all over Europe and the UAE, and a few projects in the UK. I'm Australian, you might have guessed, but I have lived around the world for many years, and I think that's something which I'll touch on later in my talk. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm always glad to come back to Kingston University because I think the landscape school here is one of the most progressive in the whole country, and I think most of Europe, and I think it's a fantastic school to learn how to become a designer and design things. The topic, and thanks also for making such a difficult topic, because I imagine it as this just big billowing sheet of what is landscape, and there's any way you pull it, it just becomes slightly bigger. It's almost like dough. You can stretch it out and drape it over things, and it just I think that's how it's composed in my mind at the moment. But I mentioned to Neil a couple of days ago. Neil is one of the directors at Gustafson Porter, and he said, "What's the topic?" And I said, "Everything." Well, what is landscape? And he said, "Everything under the sun." And it's sort of like, yeah, okay, thanks. But I think the way I interpreted what he was saying is more a territorial thing. He was suggesting that we design everything under the sun, architects design anything under the roof. And I kind of like his philosophy in that respect, but I think there's a deeper element of what is landscape which I wanted to talk about today, because I think landscape is actually out there and in here. I'll try and explain what I mean by those in the next few slides. I wanted to sort of split this talk into two sections. The first one is really a rambling stream of consciousness in a way about what my thoughts are about what landscape is, and then the second half is about how the projects that I've been working on in Gustafson Porter, and how I think these two philosophical approaches to what landscape is influence the way we design. I think so. Landscape is out there, and it's kind of a theme that we had when I was teaching here for the end of year show. It's out there. Landscape is out there, and it's also in here. It's out there in that it's an understanding of the other, and it's in here as an awareness of self. And I wanted to first off apologise for the butchering of a whole lot of probably really interesting and extended philosophical thought that other philosophers have done on this, but I sort of felt that there's probably, and I also wanted to apologise for not referencing all of those things that I've read in the past that have composed it, but I imagine my mind is this sort of meat mixer of all of these thoughts, and the sausages coming out have some sort of essence of me. So I'll continue. An understanding of the other really can be broken down into these sort of 5 different elements: the physical world, the other individuals, the other collectives, the other times, histories, and that sort of thing, and the other non-human world. And this is the out there that is landscape. The physical world are the surfaces, the materials, the touch, the tangible objects. The individuals are the characters, their individual emotions, their individual activities, their opinions, and their interests. the collectives are about culture, customs, foods, language and music and councils and authorities. And other times are obviously traditions and which form culture, histories, but also futures. I think when we design, it's always what will the future be, and also it's about the non-human world. It's an understanding of that other non-human world, which in itself has some sort of value, I hope, outside of what we can attribute to it. I love the fact that it'll just continue on without us, even if we were here or not. And I love the way that it takes over things, and when we're not around to organise it. The in here is about this awareness of self, and it's about what I am, and what I should be, and what I want to be, what I can be, as well. As I said before, I'm a landscape architect, but I'm also a human, which gives me sort of a sentient sort of consciousness. I'm 35 years old, white male, dad of one, soon to be two, which is one of the scariest things. I'm Australian born but raised in a few different countries, and lived in Melbourne, Brisbane, Leipzig, New York, and now London. And why am I telling you this? I think this is what I am, and this is where I come from, and this is how I interpret the landscape. And so landscape is what is filtered through these. Landscape is also what I should be, and this is partly defined by what the Landscape Institute tell us we should be, which I'm not sure really covers what we are. And I think also it's what landscape architecture's precedent projects are, and it's sort of our history of what landscape is. And these are almost constraining things, and I see them hopefully as potentially more flexible and allowing a more broad brush to our whatever it is we do. It's what I want to be, and I want to be inspired by what I see. I want to be happy, which is a really interesting concept in itself. I want to be understood, and I want to be able to understand the things that are around me, and I want to be creating. I want to not creative. I want to be making things. I want to be. I think being able to physically construct things or design things or put things together and make things is in itself a really pleasurable experience to produce something. So that covers not just designing things, it's actually building things and making things. And it's what I feel. It's the touch, smell, taste, hear, see, subconscious. So the landscape, if you like, is what we see out there, interpreted through ourselves. It's the out there and the in here. So I wanted to now take you through 4 projects that I've been working on since I started at Gustafson Porter, and how these 2 areas of out there, the physical world, what it is that we see, and how that is then interpreted through the way we design and the way we create things to a design. So there's no, well, there's one master plan, but there's very few master plans here. It's more about how we conceptualize the site, how we understand the site, and how we conceptualize the design. So this is a project in Lake Balatona in Hungary, and the site is almost an arboretum of trees. It's covered in a really wide spectrum of tree species, and it's a beautiful site to go and see. the water has this amazing capacity to reflect the sky. It's got these fine particles in the water which make the surface really reflective, and it changes dramatically with the storms that pass over. We were working on this over a couple of seasons, and the seasonal change in the landscape was one of the most dramatic I've seen because of the variety of trees, and all of these physical properties of the site and the context were really the inspiring things for the site. But then we needed to know what we were being asked to do, and which was basically create a new park, a new public space, and a new promenade along the walkway, and then with the usual associated development activities which come with regeneration. And this is kind of an interesting site in that it's been closed off for about sort of 40, 50 years. It was one of the old Communist Party retreats, and people from all over the USSR and everywhere came and stayed here and had a holiday here. Yuri Gagarin had one of his landing parties here. Fidel Castro came over for a bit, so it's had this really interesting history as well. But what were we trying to create? And we were trying to create basically a new town. And what does a new town need? And generally speaking, I think you could say that you need, or what does a person need? You need health, the body. You need a mind which is knowledgeable, and you need something you can get passionate about. So those three things we sort of picked up on as elements that we wanted to make sure that we covered when we designed. And then what sort of activities could really enhance those mind, body, mind, heart elements, and these we started placing them on the plan, using this as a technique to sort of create something different on the site. Jumping to a completely new project. We've worked on this project for the last couple of months, Harry and I. And actually, before I go on, I wanted to thank Harry Bix for helping me prepare this presentation. A lot of you probably know Harry, and have worked with Harry. He was a graduate from last year, but he helped me put this presentation together. This project is Hook Park. It's the Architectural Association's sort of own personal forest. They bought a forest about 10 years ago, and which was originally being designed as a furniture school by John Makepeace. And this is the sort of input that we were getting when we went on site. This was the out there. This was what was giving us the impressions of the site. And that out there was also we're also getting information from the people who were staying there and who were living out there. This is out in West Dorset, many miles away from any real civilization, and all they have out there is a workshop shed and a few buildings. And so this is one of the typical images you would see in the forest. So we wanted to know how people and how humans interact with forests, and there was two sort of aspects of the forest. There was the clearing and the actual forest itself. So we put ourselves in that position to try and understand way people interact with forests, and the way that forests can be one of the most creative things. One of the benefit of being a father is you get to read a lot of children's books, and without being embarrassed. And one of my favourite books at the moment is The Gruffalo. It's about a very creative little mouse who managed to escape from being eaten by creating this monster in his mind, which eventually ends up meeting at the end of the book. But the forest allows for that creativity because it's limiting your vision. You step into a forest and you don't know what's behind the tree, and what's behind the tree is your imagination, and that's really the amazing thing about a forest. But it can be really claustrophobic, and if your mind's slightly wacky, it could be really scary. What's behind that tree? And actually, there's wild. They were telling us that there's wild boars and that sort of thing behind it. So this landscape was about openness and a reality where you can actually see everything. There's the out there. There's the clearing where you can see your prospect is clear, and then there's the forest where your inner self, your in here, is creating things behind the trees and behind in your lack of vision. Sorry, I just skipped over that one because I wanted to keep moving. How long have I been speaking for?
Probably about 15 minutes or so.
Okay. I haven't got a huge amount more, so it's... this is a very new project which we're really excited about. It's a project in Milan that we just won the competition for. The project is for a new central park in Milan, and it's exciting on a couple of different levels. I think from a conceptual point of view, we really tried to push it, and the council was really responsive to it, but also sort of kind of exciting because of the amount of building activity and that sort of thing that's surrounding it. There's 3 architects involved in this project as well, and they're all doing their big giant towers in the middle, and then residential blocks around it, and all the residential blocks are happening now. But then interwoven through that space is our park, and it's our park was really from a conceptual point of view trying to interpret what Milan is and what the city itself is representing. The city is quite an interesting city because it's split. It's got sort of like 2 halves of its brain, almost through the middle, and it's primarily because it's on what is called the Fontenelle Line, which is a really interesting physical attribute of northern Italy. At the base of the Alps, all the water coming off the Alps starts to percolate through a band of permeable rock, and it turns into groundwater. And as it gets to the base of the valley, in the Po Valley, it hits what is sedimentary rock and a little bit less permeable, and builds up and then pops up along this Fontenelle Line. And it's a really interesting character of this whole area, that the southern part, the Po Valley and the agricultural land there, is just covered in these springs, these natural springs from the water from the Alps, and it's all groundwater just popping back up. But on the northern side of Milan, it's very dry, so that was an interesting sort of physical attribute. A historical attribute was this: it was always very industrial on the north and agricultural on the south, and so this sort of went on and on. There was a lot of contrasting elements between the north and the south of Milan. So we decided to go with a microcosm of Milan and use some of our understanding of Milan and the physical characteristics of it to create something new and create something that was very Milanese. And that involved creating our own little Fontenelle, but also involved creating forest areas that would have normally been associated with the agricultural land there. And all of this work was a combination of consultants involved, ecologists, engineers, and it was a really fascinating project in that we were getting all of this input, all of this out there information that we could try and interpret into a new design. The last one I wanted to talk about, which is one close to home, and is Woolwich Squares in East London. And these this is a really interesting project, partly because it's under construction at the moment, but also because it's got two faces to it and two designs really. The north part, the north part up here is a market square, and it's continuing to be a market square even while the construction's happening. So that's a really interesting space in that it's always been a market square. It's always been, this gatehouse is the Arsenal gatehouse, where all of the workers used to stream out from the Arsenal. And so this was a really high concentration of people moving through it and buying things on their way home. But it's always been a daytime market, and it disappears by about 4 or 5 o'clock. So it was interesting to note it was interesting to understand. So what the use of that space would be later. The other space was much more of it was originally a green space, but it was actually bomb damaged space, and it happens a lot around London where parks have just been established where a huge amount of bombs were dropped, or if not parks, residential developments. So we've just been digging up a whole lot of this area and finding huge amounts of rubble from the buildings where they just push them into the basements and opening up huge basements. And it's quite a sort of archaeological dig that we're doing at the moment. In that, although the buildings aren't that old, it's still quite interesting to uncover what's underneath the ground. And so this had a very different character. It's always been a green space since after the war. So that we wanted to have a completely different feel, and we gave it a garden feel. So we had two different characters. One to the north, very much a hard space, a market space, but during the night we actually transformed it into what we called a ballroom, with basically a really we keep calling it catenary, but it's a tensile structure above, which carries a whole lot of small lights to create a really sort of inviting atmosphere in that space. Then the north was very much about bringing the commons, the Woolwich Commons, down into the park, a sense of that, and also bringing the water up from the Thames, because you don't really realise how close you are to the Thames. So that's the 4 projects that I wanted to talk about, and this is it under construction and becoming the future. But I think in each case we've always had this out there approach where we're absorbing as much as we can about the site, about the history, about the people, and then this reinterpreting or rehashing in our heads and what are the interesting and important aspects of that, and putting that back out there. So landscape is it's on 2 sides of our skin. It's on the inside and it's on the out. It's on the 2 sides of our consciousness. I'm sure our subconscious is doing something, even though we never get to experience it. The 2 sides of our responsibilities, and it sort of feels like it's always an individual interpretation of the collective experience. It's out there and it's